BumbleKast. I'm your host, Ian Flynn, the Bumble King, and joining me as always is the inspiration for the BumbleKast, my co-host, Kyle JCRB Krause.
I'm not 100% sure if if that's a joke. I don't know. You said you wanted to do a podcast, and you talked to me, and you was like the first person you talked to about it or something. So maybe I am the inspiration for your. You are.
Normally, I try to do some kind of jokey tie-in to the topic of the episode, but this time it's like legit. So I just decided to put it out there.
Yeah, I'm a weird. I don't know. I know
it's not the level of sincerity we're used to, which is none.
I feel
roll with me here.
I feel flattered but weird when people say they're inspired by me, which has actually happened more than once. And
it is a weird sensation.
And it's like, yeah, and I'm like, that's wild. Thank you, but I mean that's weird. What do you mean? But
it's like, no, I'm corrupting children. Be better than me, young ones.
Oh no, I'm ruining everybody. How dare you? No, don't look at me. Don't look at me for inspiration. What are you doing? Oh boy, yeah, I'm sorry. It's not you, it's me. So it just feels it feels strange. But at the same time, I still appreciate it, and it's cool, but it's still a very weird feeling. I don't know. I feel like I'm not, I don't know if I don't feel grateful enough for that. I don't know. This is a weirdly heavy discussion to start the show off with, so.
It's not even the main topic, but since it's all about you, how are you, sir?
Is it all about me? Anyway, I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I am coming off of a week of being sick with something flu-like. I'm not sure. It couldn't make up its mind either. We just had a very long disagreement, and it doesn't matter, day or night, I was somewhere asleep to some degree. But I feel like I'm back.
Okay, good.
I feel like I'm rebounding, and I got another #KnowingSmile project lined up that I will not be able to talk about for probably a year. So it's like, why even bother mentioning it? It's not even fun to tease because you guys are going to forget that I even said anything by the time it comes out. But
I'm going to date this episode and say, I'm glad the coronavirus didn't kill you.
Not yet, anyway.
Boy, I love crazy, wildly overblown fears of diseases. It's great. It's fun. It's exciting. Anyway, that's not what this show's about either. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, one of the things about the BumbleKast is I wanted to cover a variety of topics, and we've pretty much skewed towards video games and movies for the most part.
Entertainment, yeah.
One of the things I wanted to touch upon when we could was cool science stuff. And one of the coolest things that came out recently was the highest quality footage of the surface of the sun ever. And you would think, okay, so that's like staring at the fireplace channel. So what? No. This is truly mind-boggling. Like, the still frame of it looked like a macro shot of caramel corn or something.
That's kind of what I thought too. Yeah, it was like molten caramel corn. It's like,
yeah,
that looks tasty.
It's like this almost lizard skin pattern of these super cells of just raw plasma, solar plasma, each one roughly the size of France, coming up.
Whoa. Okay.
Unfathomable, hundreds of thousands of miles up into the atmosphere, and then cascading down into these valleys of just pure energy, constantly roiling and boiling. And Kyle, that's so freaking cool.
The sun is awesome. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. I mean, I hate daylight, but the sun itself is pretty awesome. Like, it's just a really powerful, constant explosion. Like,
yeah,
come on, I'm down for that. That's badass. I'm here for it. So yeah. I mean, I don't have much in the way of scientific background, so I think that's why we don't tend to talk about science too much on this show, because I think we both tend to be like, yeah, that's cool. All right. But this is really cool.
And then it's just, it's kind of peeling back the veil of the cosmos a little bit. It's kind of the same feeling when we finally got those crystal clear shots of Pluto, which we thought was just kind of like maybe this cold blue icy ball out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then these vivid red shots with that big white heart-shaped snow field. It's like, oh wow, Pluto has like character now. It's real. It's a thing. And the sun's kind of the same way. It's not just this kind of halogen bulb in the sky that you can't look at directly. This just fuzzy, bright thing. It's this constantly shifting, chaotic, but yet still somewhat organized. Just words fail me. It's awe-inspiring.
Yeah,
it's just cool enough to see the little beads of plasma, coming up and rolling over. But the fact that they're gigantic, like another comparison is like each one's about the size of Texas. It's just imagining the landmass of Texas coming up made of pure fire and then falling back down only to make more mountains. It's just, the mind boggles.
Yeah, that's so freaking cool. Yeah, I dig it. I'm down. The sun is pretty cool, except it's very, very hot in reality. So, yeah, be careful, but yes. What other exciting things have we got going on, Ian?
Nothing on my end that I
Nothing?
can talk about.
Oh, okay, dang.
Not a thing.
I was hoping there was some other excitement we could talk about before we get into our main topic, but I guess that's not allowed. Dang.
Not yet. I've got cool stuff I want to talk about, but can't.
How dare you? You should fix that. Get something you can talk about.
I'm working on it.
Well, hurry up.
I'm working on it.
Tell the people you're working with to hurry up. That's probably the one who's really holding you back.
Yeah, sure, that works.
Okay.
But the topic of today's show came from a patron this time, didn't it?
Correct. Yes, this one was suggested by Anime Cowboy, who's a patron. And they wanted us to discuss our favorite classic films, games, TV, and or books that inspired our tastes. And I'm calling this Formative Media Influences.
I like that. That's a nice catch-all title.
Yep. I figured it was, formative. It makes sense. This is the things that inspired us, like, growing up or in our teen years and stuff like that. So I think a lot of mine are actually mostly from my, like, teenage years. Some of them are from when I was a kid, but I think I was exposed to a lot more media and stuff when I was a teen versus when I was a kid. I exposed myself to a lot more media in that case. When I was a kid, I was like, I only want Mario and Sonic and that's it. I don't want anything else. or like a lot of cartoons, but other than that, like not a whole heck of a lot of stuff. So it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started to get more into certain things. But so do we want to, let's go ahead and we'll start with you, and we'll start with movies. We'll start with movies. Let's go down.
Probably one of the biggest influential ones, and I feel like this is a bit of a cop-out because it's kind of everyone's influential one.
I think, definitely.
Is the original Star Wars trilogy. Because when I grew up, we had the original VHSs on the shelf, and those things were in the VCR probably at least once a week. And it kind of throws me for a loop because I actually went back and checked the dates on this. Return of the Jedi was only a year old. No, let's try that again. I was only a year old when Return of the Jedi came out. So it's been around for my entire life. Very new. It's not like something I went back and adopted. It's been around me at all points. So I don't know. There was Indiana Jones on a lot and other things, other movies, but something about Star Wars in particular always grabbed my attention, probably because, as we've already touched upon, I love things in space.
Me too.
I also like high fantasy, and Star Wars is science fantasy. It's space wizards with laser swords. And I think that's kind of why I like it so much, is it's just this, or why it had such an influence, is because it's this mishmash of genres that is unapologetically its own thing.
Right. Right.
Yes, it's probably ripped off of another comic, but we're not getting into that topic. What I'm saying is the quintessential aspects of the bright-eyed hero, the black and white morality, which doesn't stand up if you pay too much attention to it, but that's besides the point. Defying conventions with, Yoda, and having a very strong female lead. Leia kicked a whole bunch of
right
from the get-go. The disparity between the different species. Chewbacca walks and talks with all these normal humans, and they treat him as another person on the crew. There is no, oh, this is a Wookiee, he's weird and different. They talk to him, they talk to the droids, they all treat them like people, more or less. And I think that has had a large influence on how I approach other media. And when there is this disparity between races, it's like, why? Yes, I realize it's probably an allegory for racial tensions in the real world, but that's not what we're talking about. How the world of Star Wars works, and how you just kind of jump into it and say, okay, this is the rules of this universe. I'm going to play along with it.
Right. They don't treat the Wookiee like a pet, like a lot of other media, I think, even at the time would have. Actually, especially at the time would have. And things like that are talking down to the robots, except for the fact that there's that one point where they go into the cantina, Mos Eisley, and they're like, we don't serve their kind here, and tell them to get out. And they don't really explore that much, though. They don't explore, for some reason, I think that gets kind of overlooked and has been overlooked in the greater Star Wars pantheon for a while. It seems like droids are just kind of mostly accepted in later movies and stuff. So
yeah, they're kind of treated like a perpetual working class, and they kind of, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's a much bigger discussion to be had.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing though about Star Wars, is that there's just a lot to play with, more than just what you get out of the movies or any of the media that is considered official. There's a reason why there's the Star Wars expanded universe, why that ever existed in the first place, and it's because there's so many different stories to tell. There's so many different types of characters and tropes and stuff you can play with in that universe that just really makes it feel larger than even what I think the original creators thought possible, what George Lucas thought possible for sure. So I really like that aspect of it too. Just the fact that there's so much you can do and so much you can play with. And to be honest, I really think space fantasy, space technology and stuff like that is my bread and butter. Or just fantasy with technology in it is just so much cooler to me compared to just regular cyberpunk or just straight up sci-fi. Right. Just hard sci-fi and stuff like that. So I think I definitely am with you there on just Star Wars, there's just so much to play with there versus other things that it's yes, this is great. I love it. So, but for me, I'd say the movie that's probably the most influential of my history and and just what I love is Back to the Future. All three of them especially, but the first one, what's funny is the first movie came out in the 80s, and it has a lot of nostalgia for the 50s, which is very common. It's very common in 80s stuff from the 80s and media from the 80s is this just this fascination with the 50s. Which I don't think some people may not necessarily realize. So there's a lot of like strange 50s influence throughout the 80s, and I think Back to the Future really embodies that, which makes sense. I mean, it's literally time traveling back to the 1950s, so it's time traveling back to kind of the golden age of the people who made the movie. So it's this weird. It now the 80s is nostalgic for us, so we get this sort of weird nostalgia within nostalgia thing going on with Back to the Future. And of course, it's just the whole Doc Brown is just like this weird, wild kind of mad scientist, but he's a good mad scientist, which I kind of like. I kind of like the idea of sort of a mad scientist who's not like crazy going out for taking over the world or anything like that. He's just doing something ridiculous because he can, because he had this crazy idea once when he fell off his toilet and hit his head. Name of science, and it's all just science. Yeah, and he calls himself like a child of all the sciences. It's like that doesn't even exist, but I love it. I love that. So and it's just the fact that there's just like a cool cars and cool trains. I mean, the cool car, of course, is the DeLorean. That's the main. Mm-hmm. That's the main one. But then you get into like Back to the Future 3 and you get the time train. And it's just like, as a kid, seeing the time train and stuff, my imagination was just going on overdrive with that thing because it's so freaking ridiculously cool. Like, how did you make a train that flies and can travel through time and does all this stuff? And it's like, this stuff is just incredible. It's another one of those things that kind of just makes me, it's like Star Wars. It just makes me think of a world where, the stuff could exist, or where, the stuff could happen, or maybe this stuff won't ever happen, but it just looks cool. And that's really it. I don't know. And it's also just that sense of adventure and, kind of wonderment and going back in time or going into the future and just seeing what things are like, or experiencing the past, seeing, like, maybe getting, like, seeing what your parents were like, or seeing what, like, other people were like that in your life as adults, but maybe go back and see what they were like as kids, and just this overall, just this fun sense of adventure. So that's what I like about it.
And to cross-pollinate, let's remember that Marty messes with his dad in the past by pretending to be Darth Vader.
Yeah, Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, and he plays Van Halen to wake him up.
Honorable mentions in the movie category for me would be Mary Poppins, because number one, it's a charming musical because the cast is spectacular, and I think also because it embraces the nonsense and the whimsy of what Mary Poppins does unflinchingly. She pulls all of her stuff out of that single bag as if it's normal. And the children are freaking out because that doesn't happen. That's not normal. But the way that she carries it with such poise and dignity and assertiveness, it's like, no, this is how it works in my world. You're just having to accept it. When she's pouring the medicine for them and it comes out different colors, but it's the same bottle. That blew my mind as a child. They jump into the chalk drawing and there's this whole other world that's pure animation that they can freely interact with because that's what that world is. The idea that your reality is not necessarily set in stone, it is your perception that can be changed, is something that I've carried with me a whole lot. And on the other end of I wouldn't say other end of the spectrum, another facet of what's influenced me was The Brave Little Toaster, which is one of the most nightmare fuel-inducing animated features, period. And I think what's so influential about that for me is you have this clearly children's animated film. You have talking appliances going on this grand adventure to find their old owner. They leave the cabin in the woods to make their way to the city. But they face incredible perils. They suffer catastrophic damage. There's this musical number where they're lost in a junkyard and these old wrecked cars are kind of singing about how they used to be these much beloved vehicles for these people, and now they are nothing as they get carted away to be compacted. It is a really, really dark movie at points, but with this veneer of the brightly colored animation. And I think that, to me, says that you can tell a story, a serious story, in a kind of fluffy context if you find that balance. Mm-hmm. You can have a talking toaster with big shiny eyes and a big smile do these heroic things and make it engaging and believable as long as the characters within their universe treat it as serious. At no point is there kind of a wink and a nudge saying, they're talking appliances. Isn't this silly? No, it's in their world, and they take it very seriously, and the stakes are pretty high when something catastrophic happens, like the lamp who needs to recharge, who needs an electrical source to search for their missing friend, aims himself at a lightning bolt thinking that that will give him the electricity he needs. He gets blown away. The bulb gets blasted. He gets burnt for most of the film.
Wow, I forgot about that. Yeah.
The toaster throws himself into the gears so that the kid doesn't get crushed in the compactor, and you see the toaster getting ground up in the gears. It isn't this kind of, haha, he wedged himself and he'll be fine. Sacrifices were made.
Right.
And it's this stupid little cartoon toaster. Again, if the universe treats itself seriously while keeping that balance of being aware that these are talking cartoon appliances, I think you can really get this evocative, powerful moment. It's probably best seen with what I'm doing with the Sonic book right now. These bright, colorful characters are going through a zombie apocalypse where nobody's dying. There's no blood and gore, but there's still the emotional stake that the characters are invested in that brings you into the story so that you get invested in it.
Right. Yeah, man. You reminded me of this movie by listing it, and I'm like, oh yeah.
It took me years to watch the nightmare sequence without flinching. That freaking clown, man.
Yeah. No, that movie's great. The thing is, it's a kids movie, but it's a kids movie that does not talk down to its audience, and that is very much appreciated, both as a kid and as an adult. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Brave Little Toaster is one of those things I'd forgotten about, but you reminded me of it, and I'm glad you did, because it's really, really good. Some of my honorable mentions for movies, Rescuers Down Under. I remember
excellent film.
Yeah, absolutely. I have not seen it in forever though, so my memory on it is hazy now, but I remember as a kid just like watching the VHS to death, like over and over, to the point where I could recite lines from the movie directly. Like I could just talk back to the movie constantly. Just like, I remember like Miss Bianca. She's sort of like this, she's a nice character, but she's kind of a posh sort of a character you wouldn't necessarily expect to be so adventurous, but I think that's one of the things that I liked about her, was that she was like the one who was all gung-ho to go out, while Bernard was kind of like the one who didn't necessarily want to go, but he did it anyway because he was the reluctant hero, while she was the one who wanted to get out and go on an adventure and save the world and do all that stuff. And I think that was another thing that like really inspired me, was characters like her. Aladdin, also a big inspiration for me, definitely. Just the silliness of the genie, and the fact that it's a story that ostensibly takes place during the Arabian Nights tale, but it doesn't necessarily ground itself 100% in reality. So you get characters, not at all. You get characters like the genie, who's just like making references to modern day things, and of course he's hilarious because he's voiced by Robin Williams, who's just doing his Robin Williamsiest. So yeah, that's definitely another big influence. The original Spider-Man movie was probably like the first time I got really excited about, well, maybe not. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like I was thinking the first time I got really excited about superhero stuff, but no, because I liked a lot of the cartoons, superhero cartoons and stuff earlier, but I was never a big comics reader when I was a kid outside of like Sonic. That was the only comic I read as a kid. So, but like the cartoons like Spider-Man and stuff, and then having the live action Spider-Man, which just kind of blew me away, was the fact that, oh, we're here now. We can have actual live action Spider-Man, and it looks it looks good, at least for the time. I mean, some of it's aged a little poorly, but there's just something about it that was like just another really big inspiration for me. And then X-Men 2 was another one of those. Probably one that hasn't aged super well, but I kind of like the dynamic of a superhero team. That was another thing that inspired me. And I saw that movie in the theater like 5 or 6 times, mainly because I would go to I'd go to my dad's house on the weekends, and I'd be there with my stepbrother, and we'd be like bored, and we just want to go to the movies, and we'd be like, "What do you want to see? X-Men 2 again?" And we're like, "Yep, we're gonna go see X-Men 2 again," because that's all there was playing at the time. And so we saw it a whole bunch of times, and I think a lot of that kind of inspired me to look at like superhero teams and teams that team ups of like people who had abilities and like how they complemented each other. I'm just like really getting into like groups that complement each other, and I think that was a big inspiration for me. Days of Thunder, which is a racing movie with Tom Cruise. It's basically Top Gun, but with stock cars instead. And I was just when I was a kid watching that, I was just excited to see all the cars and all the crashing and all the destruction and all the speedness and stuff. So that was sort of the main thing that I liked about that movie. On rewatches nowadays, it does not quite hold up in the same way Top Gun does, but it's still a fun movie, even though it's not really a realistic portrayal of racing. Like the crashing does not happen quite like that. So, but I don't know. I liked it. It just was another thing that I was like, oh, you could tell stories about car racing. And as a kid, I absolutely adored like cars and things like that and just watching racing. So that was fun for me. And I like that, there's stories to tell within that world. And then of course Die Hard is another big one for me. Just the fact that it's possible. I think Die Hard really emphasizes telling a small story, because Die Hard takes place in one building, and it's like mainly the conflict between two people.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that kind of inspired me to think. I have like these ideas of superhero teams and stuff like that, people going on big adventures, but you can also tell stories in confined places, and Die Hard, I think, really emphasizes the idea of being like just in a tower in downtown LA, and there's enough of a story to tell there with conflict between two people going on that that's also like really inspiring to me. So I like that a lot.
I didn't see Die Hard until much later in life, and for one thing, it ages very well.
Yes.
It still holds up. And as big and bombastic as an action movie it takes its time. It has a lot of surprisingly long, slow moments and downtime, but it never feels like a drag. It always feels like you're catching your breath and you're getting things set up for the next absolutely ludicrous shootout.
Right.
It's just a really well-constructed movie.
It's a very well-paced movie. Yes, absolutely. The book it's based on is also pretty good. But I didn't read that until much later, so it's not in this list. But yeah, the book it's based on, you can see a lot of what they take from it. The book is more introspective because it's from the main character's perspective, which is not John McClane, but it's essentially John McClane. But it's a bit more introspective than Die Hard is, which Die Hard's a bit more bombastic and, just got some silly action set pieces. Although most of the set pieces, now that I think about it, are actually in the book too. So It's just a really, I think the book being so good really helps Die Hard be good too. But not to diminish the filmmakers or anything. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into making a film than necessarily writing a book. So the fact that they were able to pull it off so well, and that it was so influential throughout the 80s and 90s, just is a testament to how good it is. Are we ready to move on into games?
Yeah, moving on to games. It's going to surprise no one. Sonic is a big one for me.
Yeah,
let's not even dwell on that.
Yeah, me too.
We know that story.
Me too, yeah.
One of the games that I never got to play a lot of myself, this was more of something I got to play at a friend's house, but the original X-Men on the Genesis had a really neat trick to it where you jump to a bunch of different locations because the danger room is on the fritz. And one of them is you're in the Mojoverse. And once you defeat Mojo, you're stuck in the Mojoverse. The level doesn't end. And there's this little hint in the game manual. Remember when games had manuals? That tells you that you have to reboot the system. And you literally have to hit reset yep. on your Genesis.
Yep.
And it saves just enough data in the memory so that when the game starts up again, you're back in the danger room, but you haven't lost any progress. And that kind of just blew my mind. It's like, this was Undertale levels of messing with you outside of the direct game experience.
Yeah.
And I like that degree of messing with you outside of the medium. You're invested in whatever you're engaged with to a degree. But if you can find a way to sneak up on your reader, your viewer, your player, and engage them in a way that they weren't expecting, that can be really creepy, but it can also be really fun. I don't think I'm smart enough to pull off something like that, but I appreciate it when it's done well.
Right.
And also, of course, Skies of Arcadia. Not that it did anything groundbreaking in terms of gameplay or storyline or visuals, but it's just such a comfy game. And in a period where RPGs were full of grunge and despair and all these really harsh negative vibes to be taken so seriously, to have this bright, colorful, open world where the main character's motivation is basically, I have to keep going. If things get tough, I have to strive harder, because if I give up, that's it. And just the dynamics of the crew were so wholesome. There was no infighting or bickering aside from Drachma, but he was a grumpy old man anyway, and he had good reason to be grumpy. I mean, you have your darker elements in it, to be sure. It's very, very by the numbers kind of anime story, but it's still just so free and fun. Just exploring the skies of the world was breathtaking. And I love that sense of freedom and exploration, and it opened my eyes to the idea of sky ships or airships or whatever you want to call them, because those are freaking cool.
Yes, they are.
And
yeah.
You've got islands floating around in the sky. How weird is that, dude? And magic crystals, and there's some kind of high tech, but it's also a little rustic here and there. Mm-hmm. And you're gonna see a whole lot of that in Dragoon if you haven't caught on already. It's such a great game, and I love it to pieces. And okay, I'm done. What about you?
Well, I want to go back to X-Men real quick. I want to touch on that because
okay.
It also makes me think of games like Metal Gear Solid, where kind of like it plays with the games that play with the medium a bit. So like Metal Gear Solid does that, where it's what is his name?
Otacon?
No. The boss who reads your memory card and like makes comments about what's on it. Psycho Mantis, that's right. Yeah, when Psycho Mantis like reads your memory card and it's like, oh,
and changes the channel on the TV.
Yeah,
messes with the volume and all that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Also, Eternal Darkness does a lot of that too on the GameCube.
Yeah, but that's more actual creepy.
Well, yeah, but still, it's another one of those things where the medium is playing with itself, in a sense, which I really enjoy. And I think games are like uniquely positioned to be able to do that and kind of screw around with the player, or just do things as kind of a joke, or do things as like a story point, like with what happens in Undertale multiple times.
Right.
And I think that is really cool. And that's something that really separates games from other types of media out there. Speaking of games, my most influential game is definitely Mega Man X. No, of course not. I told you you'd be able to guess mine, like, straight up. Like, yeah, movie and game.
That or one of the Daytonas.
Movie and game is going to be real easy for me. And Daytona is one of my honorable mentions, just because, you know, it's just, Daytona just has that, you know, that everything that appeals to me. It's got fast cars, it's got silly music, it's got lots of colors, and it's got like crashing and fun stuff like that. But, you know, there's not a whole heck of a lot of depth to Daytona. It's just good arcade fun. Mega Man X, I feel like on one end, I love Mega Man X and what it does, but on the other end, I feel like there are like tons of missed opportunities and things that don't get explored enough and haven't been explored. And just the fact that the series has fallen off the map, essentially, is another one of those heartbreaking things. And it's like, there's so much to this world that's just fascinating to me. Honestly, it feels to me like a bright and colorful world sort of juxtaposed with the horrors of war. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that I like about it. But you got these like cool, heroic characters with superpowers, and you get these really unique character designs in the form of the animal-themed Mavericks and stuff like that, or animal-themed Reploids. They're not even all Mavericks. And they're not even all animals either, now that I think about it, but whatever, you know what I mean. Just like the character designs and stuff like that. It's all sort of a continuation of the original Mega Man series, but it just brings like so much more to the table. The original Mega Man is kind of I guess it's seen as generally a bit more on the I guess kiddie side of things, not entirely, but Mega Man X definitely like brings it more. I guess gives it more. It makes things a little bit more edgy, but with it's not like ridiculously. It's not like Shadow the Hedgehog levels of edgy.
Right.
It's not ridiculously over the top edgy. It just gives
for
a
the
little
most
bit,
part. For the most part.
Yeah, there's a few things, but I don't know. I just like that idea of like this really cool, techie, futuristic world filled with like cool cities and bright characters and stuff like that, but they're like kind of at war with each other and they're at each other's throats. That's really cool. And I think that's another thing I kind of like about the direction of modern Sonic and the way you've presented it with in the comics in IDW, because this obviously is all like post-war Sonic Forces stuff. Sonic Forces, not necessarily a super great game, but I like the concept. And I think the idea of Mega Man X just generally really inspires me. And there's a lot of things. Another thing about Mega Man X is there's a lot of things in that universe that you can play with and have fun with that is kind of reminiscent of Star Wars in a way. You can have like ridiculously, you can have characters that wouldn't normally necessarily be like in the same room as each other, or like wouldn't necessarily interact with each other, but there's just like there's so much variety and creativity in the world that you can have characters that would normally be out of place with each other, you know, either working together or against each other, things like that. I really enjoy that aspect of it. What about you've already mentioned all your games. I was gonna say, what about your honorable mentions for games, but you already talked about them. So I guess we'll talk about mine real quick. Mario, obviously, I really don't have to go into that one. Mario Kart is another one. Mario Kart really opened my eyes to the fact that you could just have anybody in a racing game. Yeah. you can have any sort of racing game you want. You can throw anybody in there. And I'm like, yes, this is it. This is me. This is Mario and racing. This is everything I love all in one. I love it. It's perfect. Sonic, obviously, we can't not mention Sonic for both of us, but I mean,
right.
That much is obvious. We don't really need to go into so much detail on it. Star Fox, I feel like this one has fallen off for me in recent years. I just haven't gotten.
It hasn't been a good game since '64.
That's right. Yeah. So I just really haven't gotten into it, and it makes me feel bad. But I don't know. Star Fox is another one of those. Star Fox actually makes me think of Star Wars, which makes sense. There's pretty obvious major influences on it.
You can make an argument that kind of thematically, Star Fox is almost the Mega Man X of Sonic.
Kinda, yeah. I can see that. There's definitely some themes there that I could see that. I just think, like, it really has sort of the same feel as Star Wars. You can have all these different characters, coming together. You have this heroic good versus evil sort of morality and things like that, they don't really, sadly, there hasn't been enough games to really dive deep and explore it, but there's definitely some stuff there to play with. Plus, you got like really cool spaceship designs, and I actually quite like the look of Star Fox, the original Star Fox and Star Fox 2. I think things like that really get the imagination going, just because they're so, like, they're simplistic looking in the game, but you can imagine like sort of the details and what they look like, what they would look like in reality. It's another one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is great. And the music, of course, the music is one of those things that just really holds up, especially the original game. Other ones, like racing games for me, obviously are a big one. Like, I don't know, San Francisco Rush is a game that I think a lot of people would not bring up or really mention at all. But I don't know, just it's another fun arcade racer in the vein of Daytona USA, but it takes place in real life in what's supposed to be more of a real life city. Obviously, it's a pastiche of San Francisco. It's not really based on anything, but I think just seeing a racing game take place in a real city like that, where like it's just crazy, high flying, super fast cars just jumping around all over the place, just kind of made me look around in real life and think, man, how cool would that be if you could do that in real life? That would be awesome.
Well, you could, but then you'd be arrested.
Well, yeah, plus we'd have to be on the moon to get the physics that San Francisco Rush has, so that's...
just get up enough speed. I'm sure you can do it. I believe in you, Kyle.
And we have like Destruction Derby and Gran Turismo. Destruction Derby is more of an arcade racer, but I'd say that because my dad grew up doing dirt track car racing, or I grew up with him doing dirt track car racing, and the fact that I was able to play a game that sort of emulated sort of what he was doing through Destruction Derby was just really exciting to me. Gran Turismo, of course, like really solidified my love of cars and stuff like that. So Gran Turismo was a good way to explore the wide world of motor vehicles, which no game had really let you do before, and just made me appreciate a lot more things about cars and stuff like that than I would have otherwise. F-Zero, on the other hand, F-Zero is just a big comic book silliness thing. Mm-hmm. A big, dumb comic book superhero thing that I just adore. Another world of bright colors, but also like real stakes, especially in like F-Zero GX when they add an actual storyline to things. And it's like, oh yeah, there's actually some really cool things you could play with in this universe. You can have these silly characters, but as the game, you can kind of take them seriously, and you could have some fun with the storyline and things like that. So yeah, that's another thing that I appreciated about it. Earthworm Jim kind of gave me an appreciation for the absurd and the ridiculous that I didn't know I needed in my life until I played it. So Earthworm Jim, of course, he's a worm. A super suit falls on him. He's an earthworm. A super suit falls on him, and he becomes a superhero. And I don't know. There was just something about that really appealed to me. It's another things like you give me bright colors and things exploding and like I don't know, cool music and whatever, and I'm set. I'm a simple man with simple needs, Ian. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, let's move on to TV.
I was a child of the 80s, which is to say the extended toy commercials.
Mm-hmm.
And darn it, I loved my toy commercials, and I wanted all the toys, and it definitely worked.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I also got hyped up when the cereal mascot commercials had a storyline, so I'm an even simpler man with simpler needs, apparently. But like, of all the ones of the early 80s, the ones that stuck out to me were Thundercats and Silverhawks. Thundercats because it had that high fantasy with just a twinge of sci-fi to it. He's got the magic sword, and most of the time they're relying on their own weapons and some kind of vague magical abilities. And, Mumra himself is clearly a lich of some sort. But then they also have a tank and, a giant cat-shaped base that might be a laser cannon, depending if you take the toys cannon. So it's, a little bit of that science fantasy stuff. And then Silverhawks was basically Thundercats in space when you really get down to it. And it was more of the sci-fi leaning, but you had a little bit of the space magic in there with one of the Silverhawks actually being a magician. And I don't know if it ever got a full explanation, but the main bad guy is pretty clearly some kind of space wizard. So, both of those, I guess, right there pretty much define what I like in terms of narratives. Ninja Turtles, of course, because everybody loved Ninja Turtles. I mean, who couldn't?
I think we talked about this, and I actually didn't like the Ninja Turtles at first, but I warmed up on them as I got older.
I must have blocked that out because I started to involuntarily lip curl at you. It's like, it's a good thing you're on the other side of the continent, buddy. Otherwise, you're going to have a talk.
Well, no. I was just when I was a kid, a really young kid, I was just kind of scared of things that seemed kind of violent and monstrous. Even though TMNT is not really monstrous, but it's just as a really young kid, I just wanted my Mario and my Sonic. That's all I wanted. But as I got a bit older, I learned to appreciate things like Ninja Turtles a lot more. So yes.
And then absolutely, I'm surprised I didn't have this at the top of my list. Gargoyles.
Yes, I really need to go back and rewatch it.
Because if you want your brightly colored characters, but with your long-running narrative...
Absolutely, yep.
With your darker themes, but the goofiness takes itself seriously without being too far up its own butt.
Mm-hmm.
Just Gargoyles is a masterclass. It has its stinkers here and there, to be sure.
Well, yeah, it's a 90s
and
cartoon.
A lot of it is carried by Keith David's voice. But... and the surprising number of Star Trek actors that came in to play people, but
yeah,
everything about Gargoyles is just freaking phenomenal. Now that I actually had Disney Plus, I should go back and watch it again.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it too. I'm just the thing is, when I was a kid, I'd kind of catch it here and there, but I never really got to sit down and watch it and experience it as a whole. So I really need to get back to it.
I mean, the Owen is Puck long con. I don't know if they had that established from the get-go, but the fact that it makes sense when they retcon it in there is just delightful. I love that slow burn reveal. I don't know when they seeded it, when it was supposed to become, a thing, but I love it. I love it. I love it. Some of the designs of the characters, especially Oberon and Titania, are like, wow, I had no taste as a child. That is some 90s character design, but just everything about it is so good. And I love the suave intelligence of Xanatos, the smugness without making him completely unlikable. It's everything about it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it.
Man, I remember Gargoyles being so good, but I really need to go back to it. Really need
There's
to revisit
another one
it.
that should be on my list, but you already laid claim to it, so I'll let you say it.
Okay. So for me, I think the most influential TV show, and this really like kind of cemented my sense of humor and also my appreciation for like the creation of media in general, not just movies. We've talked about this one at length previously, but for me, it's Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of the way it doesn't take itself super seriously, but it still has a narrative and kind of makes you feel for the characters. And this is outside of the theater, of course. This is all stuff that's happening just on the ship. But, you still kind of have the feeling for the characters, and just the fact that they do... It's just this, like, just this group of funny people in Podunk, Minnesota, making a TV show on a thin budget and just doing the best that they can and managing to get it on national TV on cable and just doing the things that they were doing on TV that I don't think any other show would even like really do. Like there aren't many shows that had like a shoestring budget that embraced having a shoestring budget like this. So, and of course the actual making fun of movies and stuff also really appealed to me. And it gave me an appreciation for the movies and the idea of filmmaking and the process of filmmaking and just how difficult it actually is to do, because there's a lot of stinkers and a lot of really bad movies out there. But MST3K kind of shines a light on them and says, yeah, we're making fun of this, but also, making a movie is kind of hard. So, we kind of understand that we're poking fun at this, but we kind of understand that, they had a vision, they had a dream, they tried their best, they did what they could. and here we are.
We tease because we love.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you can tell there's a lot of love for movies just based on all the references that they make and stuff like that. And there's just a lot of love for pop culture in general throughout the show, and even for things like, science and stuff like that. I mean, science is literally in the title of the show, but the references that they make and stuff, just the breadth of knowledge that the writers clearly had, even outside of pop culture, is just pretty astounding, actually. And just the fact that it's so funny and so well done, even despite all the odds of kind of everything being against it. It's just one of those things that just like another thing that really just captures my imagination and just gives me an appreciation more for media in general, but especially like filmmaking and stuff like that. For me also, Sat AM, Sonic Sat AM. It's another thing like,
sure,
bright, colorful characters in sort of a dour world of, trying to fight back. It's another, like, it's kind of has a Star Wars feel to it because it's a small rebellion versus the enormous empire. And it's just another one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, this is great. I love like plucky upstarts rising up against the overlords. I don't know. Just there's something about that. I think a lot of people enjoy that kind of thing, and Sat AM is something that embraces that and has a lot of fun with it and explores some stuff outside of what Sonic games were doing at the time, which wasn't a whole heck of a lot story-wise. So it sort of established Sonic in my mind as more of a character, more of a realistic portrayal of a person rather than just the avatar of the game that were out at the time.
Right. It set the narrative bar for the franchise.
Right. And it just put everybody, like, I like the way it kind of, like, it's another a team up story where everyone kind of has something to bring to the table, something that they offer, something that makes them unique. So, and I appreciate things like that too, where you got unique characters, all coming together and just, teaming up to do cool stuff. DuckTales is just, a whole heck of a lot of fun. The original DuckTales. I've been rewatching it, and it does not have like a real overarching narrative so much. It definitely not like the modern version, which I did not remember. For some reason, I thought DuckTales had more of an overarching thing, but I guess not.
I feel like there were story arcs.
There are a couple here and there, but it's actually surprisingly pretty standalone for the most part. At least in the first season. I haven't gotten much further than that, so I don't know if that changes or not. But there's just the Scrooge McDuck is like he's a character you think would be completely unlikable. He's this rich jerk who's kind of like he penny pinches. He's not very like, what's that word for the rich who give out a lot of money? He's not really a philanthropist or anything. He's very much just like, it's my money. But he's still likable, and that's an admirable thing. And it's tough to do that. It's really tough to have like a character that's rich and also likable. So,
well, unlike most bajillionaires, he actually works for his money.
Right. He absolutely does, and it's pretty inspirational. I think that's a rarity. So, Tailspin, another just big high flying adventure for me that I loved and didn't initially quite realize was actually Baloo was from a Jungle Book. I didn't quite realize that at first. It wasn't until later. But I don't know, just more stuff that was fun for me. Just that's really the main thing. It was just with having fun with it. And so I remember being like obsessed with Tailspin for a while. Darkwing Duck was sort of the same thing. I recently went back to Darkwing Duck and realized how many like superhero tropes and stuff that it plays with and makes fun of. Things that I'd never realized at the time, but now that I'm more familiar with comic books and superhero stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. That's a thing that makes Darkwing Duck genius, is just the way that it plays with superhero tropes and plays with your expectations of those and makes fun of it, but still in a loving way. Speaking of superheroes, Batman and Superman, the animated series.
There we go. That's the one.
Those are like freaking master classes in animated storytelling. I mean, especially Batman, but there's also a lot of good stuff in the Superman animated series. Unfortunately, I never got to the point where I started watching Justice League and stuff like that. I should, but just
honestly, and I'm just gonna derail for a half second.
Go ahead.
I wasn't impressed with Justice League itself. I felt like its hour-long episodes were meandering, and that the voice direction, for whatever reason, was very wooden. But then when Justice League Unlimited rolls around, everything just becomes phenomenal again. So I don't know what it was about Justice League itself. I'm not a fan, and I don't think you necessarily have to watch it to keep up with what's going on in Unlimited. So
I figured probably
just
not.
So you know.
Not. I was kind of I was saying Justice League is kind of shorthand for both Justice League Unlimited and stuff like that.
I make the distinction because I'm a pedantic nerd.
But there is a distinction because Justice League and Justice League Unlimited are different. Yeah, I get it, but I don't know. It's just another one of those things that was like, I wasn't into comic books when I was a kid so much. I mean, Sonic, and that was about it. But these animated series sort of brought me into the world of like superheroes, and just like the art direction, especially on Batman, is just phenomenal. Like
the title card for some of those episodes. Oh my god!
Yeah, like the art deco design for Batman is just fantastic. I love it. It's so good. Animaniacs, that's another one that really like solidified my sense of humor. Animaniacs and Peaky and the Brain and Tiny Toon Adventures, all three of them. I don't know, just all really fun shows that Tiny Toons especially is kind of like a sort of a continuation of the Warner Brothers classics. It's just like all these little vignettes and shorts that are all combined together. And that gave me sort of an appreciation for that style. And then a little bit later, once I actually started watching the original Warner Brothers cartoons and stuff too, I really... that's what really made me appreciate what was going on in Tiny Toons and the references they were making and stuff like that. Animaniacs is a little bit of the same thing too. And then the X-Men cartoon.
Yes.
It's just good. It's just good. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't.
I don't know about good, but it was very ambitious.
Maybe it doesn't hold up super well, but yeah, that's kind of what I mean. It doesn't hold up super well, but it is very ambitious, and there are definitely aspects of it that I just really, really love. And there's just something appealing about the X-Men in general. I think that's why I also have, back in my movies, where X-Men 2 was one of my honorable mentions. There's just something kind of appealing about that group of characters and everything. So yeah, great stuff. I don't have any books, Ian. I don't really have any books that were super influential on me.
Illiterate clod.
That's
true.
You
uncultured swine, how dare you?
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. But I really had to think. I really had to think about it. And I'm like, I really can't think of any books that were, I don't know, super influential. The sad fact is that I haven't read nearly as many books as I probably should. A lot of my reading was done like in school. And I just am having a hard time remembering a lot of books that I did that I read. And it's like, what do I do? What do I come up with? What do I say? And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just be honest and say that, well, I spent a lot of my time sitting in front of the TV playing video games and watching shows. And I didn't even watch that many shows. I just watched a whole heck of a lot of cartoons. That's what my whole freaking honorable mentions list was cartoons. I don't have any live action stuff, so except for MST3K, which is barely live action. Might as well be a cartoon. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, my book influences are kind of scarce for me, and I had a hard time coming up with like a really good one that stuck with me. I can remember books I've read, but I don't look back on them and think, oh yeah, that was a really fantastic book that really inspired me or anything like that. I'm just like, yeah, I read that book. It was all right. I don't know. I just can't think of anything. So I'll defer to you on this one because you are more well read than I.
Well, only in that I have read a few things. I guess I wouldn't call myself very well read, but maybe some of these will tickle your fancy.
There are books I'm interested in, but also the fact that books are just like books are like a dedication, man. You can't just sit down and absorb a book in a couple hours or anything. It takes some time, and I think that's another thing that I was just like, let's do something else.
The first thing that came to mind for me was the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. We had the first 3 volumes, because the first 3 books came out relatively close to each other, and then it was a long time between 3 and 4, and then he rushed through 5, 6, and 7 after the car incident because he wanted to finish the story before mortality finally claimed him. I could probably go on at length about the Dark Tower series in general, but the first 4, to me, are the strongest of the series. I read the original printing of the first book. There is a heavily revised version where he went back and tweaked it so that it fit better with what came after. Because the first book was extremely experimental. He was working under a philosophy of write what you feel and don't worry about the explanation, which he has since said is stupid and he should never have done that. And I could argue that there's some merit to it. You can get very hung up in trying to figure out all the minutia, and there would be something kind of interesting in just putting things on the page and seeing what kind of meaning floats to the surface like oil. But it's this very surreal fantasy series. And I think the first book especially is very much in the realms of you're kind of blundering forward into this world that's got just enough definition that you have some grounding, but is so alien that you don't feel comfortable in it. It's not a horror book. There are certainly horrible things that happen. There are frightening moments, but it's kind of this perfect uncanny valley story where everything is just familiar enough that you can follow along, but it's weird enough that you don't feel comfortable throughout the whole thing. And then after that, the narrative kind of finds itself and it becomes a little more cohesive, but it still has a degree of just odd things, and the world is unraveling, not like falling apart. It's not crumbling in this big dramatic over the top movie fashion. It's dying, and things are kind of reality itself is kind of pulling apart at the seams. So stuff happens that doesn't quite make sense. And that right there is a fascinating concept to me and utterly terrifying in its own right. Also, book 4, Wizard and Glass, I set as one of my top tier books because I will never read it again. It broke my heart. Just thinking about the particular scene is already getting me kind of choked up thinking about it. I can't read Wizard and Glass again because I know what's coming and I don't want to see it again. It's phenomenally done. He's a absolute monster for doing it. I hate him. I love him. It's great. I don't know if I would recommend the entire series, but that's a whole other podcast. I'm going to set that aside.
See, the only experience I have with Stephen King is some of the movies, like which I think are mainly made for TV, and I remember reading the Tommyknockers. And
see, that's one I haven't read yet.
The book is endlessly fascinating until you get to the end, and then it just kind of falls apart. It's one of those things where like you kind of get sucked into it, and then by the end of the movie, it's like, or by the end of the book, it's like, oh, okay, that's boring. Whatever.
Other ones I'd recommend, just not really as influential, but just since we're on the topic, real quick.
Sure.
The Stand is kind of like his most revered book.
I read about half of The Stand and kind of just burn out on it because it's so long. Yeah. But I do remember reading about half of it. It was interesting, but it just eventually I'm just like, okay, calm down, Steven. You don't need so many words, do you?
Salem's Lot, which terrified me no end. It's about vampires. And Eyes of the Dragon, which is about as close as you're going to get to a children's fantasy novel by him.
Mm-hmm.
Which has tenuous links to the Dark Tower, so right there it wins points. So does Salem's Lot, actually. So yeah, there you go.
What about like Carrie? That's almost like that almost seems like I might be.
I haven't read Carrie.
Interested in that one. And there's Maximum. What is it? Maximum Overdrive. Is that?
I'm not familiar with that one.
I think that's like a short story or something by him, right?
He's extremely prolific. You could probably just make up a title and be like, "No, I haven't heard of that one."
Oh, it's just a movie. Okay, this is a movie. Okay, what is I thought the movie was based on something, but I don't know. Mainly, I mostly know Maximum Overdrive because the soundtrack's by AC/DC. It is pretty awesome. So that's mainly who I know about it. Yeah, I think it's mainly a movie. So,
a bit of children's literature that really stuck with me was a title called Maniac McGee by Jerry Spinelli. That's really outside of my wheelhouse. Like most of the stuff I read in school growing up was either assigned in class or we had to like pick a book at random off the library shelf and read it. And I really hated those stories or that kind of forced literature. Yeah. I don't remember how Maniac McGee was put in my hands. It might have been a gift. It might have been a recommendation. I don't know. I can't even quite remember when I read it. I know I was like grade school, but it's about this orphan boy who comes to a small town, and it kind of becomes an urban legend. He does all these really mundane, incredible feats that shake the foundation of the small town community. And I guess it's kind of fanciful, but it's not what I would typically read, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember being very, very engaged with the series of small adventures in a town where, again, it's all the crazy things that happen aren't really that crazy. They're kind of mundane, but they're in that kind of, as a child, they would seem extraordinary.
Sure, yeah.
There's a giant knot hanging outside of the storefront that everyone's tried to untangle for years. and nobody's managed to even make a dent in it. And then Maniac McGee shows up and spends like a few days straight unraveling it, and he manages to untie the knot. That sounds very blasé, but the way it's presented in the book, it feels just like one of those stories you would tell on the playground. Like, did you hear about so-and-so? He did this. No way, that's not possible. I swear to God it did. And then just in brief, the Alvin Maker series and the Ender's Game saga by Orson Scott Card. Ender's Game, clearly sci-fi with maybe a smidge of science fantasy. The sci-fi gets a little loosey-goosey towards the end. And then Alvin Maker is pure fantasy set in an alternate reality colonial America. And it gets very magic-y later on, but it has a lot of interesting elements to it. The biggest thing from the Alvin Maker series, so the premise of the Alvin Maker is Alvin is the seventh son of a seventh son.
Mm-hmm.
And in this world, people have, what are they called? Basically, they have mutant powers. It's a different name from that, but
yeah,
some people have special talents.
Sure.
And it could be something as mundane as they always draw a perfectly straight line, or they can actually douse. It's not just make-believe. But because Alvin is the seventh son of a seventh son, his talent is that he is a maker, and that he can literally shape reality. And he is fated to do battle against the Unmaker, which is this faceless presence that barely manifests itself in the book. It's more of this kind of ambient idea, and it only really actively confronts Alvin at one particular point, and it's absolutely terrifying. But the idea of the Unmaker, this omnipresent force of entropy, really resonated with me. I really dig this idea of a not necessarily malevolent force, but something that just seeks to undo.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have any morality to it. It doesn't have any way to bargain with it. It just exists to do. It's a force of nature with just enough awareness for you to know that it's targeting individuals sometimes. And
Sure.
That to me is spooky. And I really dig it.
Nice. Does anybody yell Alvin Maker and shake their fist or anything in it at all? No.
Not that I remember. It's been a while.
Oh, darn.
Last I remember reading, and this has been years, the last book in the series kind of meandered without much of a point, and I don't think anything was done with it afterwards. So It may have died on the vine, but so it goes. The first, I'd say 2 or 3 books are really worth getting into.
Mm-hmm. Well, while we've been sitting here, Ian, I actually thought of something.
Oh, there we go.
And
what do you got?
I mean, obviously this is formative media influences. I don't think it holds up now, but Animorphs.
I never got into Animorphs.
Yeah, I kind of thought about it. I'm like, what was I reading when I was a freaking kid? What was I reading? Oh, crap, that's right, Animorphs. Yeah, Animorphs was like, it's about a group of kids who get the power to, essentially get the power to morph into animals, I think, like after touching them or by touching them. I forget exactly. It's been so long since I read them, and my memory is not the greatest, but and then they're like basically conscripted into this secret intergalactic war that nobody knows about.
It gets hardcore from my understanding.
And yeah, it really does. It really solidifies the fact that like, war is hell, and even though this is a series intended for kids, we're not going to sugarcoat it. People are going to die. Bad things are going to happen. And it's all kind of couched in this sort of, this idea of kids being able to turn into animals. It's, on the surface, it's a very silly thing, but like, I don't know. I just remember it being like really fascinating, and it sort of, it plays with different tropes and does different things that I just like really thinking about now. I'm like, yeah, that is actually some really cool and really creative stuff that is something that I like wasn't actively thinking about that I don't actively think about regularly in terms of it being from Animorphs, but I'm like, yeah, there's actually quite a bit that you can take from that. And just this idea, it's another thing of like this, like these normally what you would expect to be like this colorful world, or these characters who you think wouldn't be like in such a dour situation, but they're like presented with basically with war, and they have to deal with it, and they have to deal with the repercussions of being involved in intergalactic craziness. So yeah, Animorphs for me, I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess I did read a lot of Animorphs now that I thought about it. So Goosebumps too, I did read a bit, but I think that's more kind of standalone, and I never was a big fan of horror, so I always kind of got scared and kind of didn't finish them and stuff. So nowadays I look back and like I read like stories about what Goosebumps was about, and I'm like, oh, that's just silly. Why was I ever scared of that to begin with? But at the time, it's just, just sends your brain into overdrive and just gets real frightening. So yeah, but definitely Animorphs was one of those things for me. It was like, oh man, that was a lot more influential than I thought, now that I think about it. So I don't know. I guess I just like real colorful characters who have really fun designs getting into some real freaking trouble. I guess that's me, huh? Is that a bad thing? Is that like, does that say something about me that I should know about? Do I have problems?
It's bad, we'll go to the same psych ward when they commit us. It's
okay.
We got the same illness because I'm right there with you.
All right. Well, we've been going for quite a while.
We have. It's time for the Q&A portion of the show.
Yes.
Now, before we get started, let's lay some ground rules. Number 1, if your question has been answered on the FAQs featured on bumbleking.com, we're not going to answer it. The FAQs are there for a reason. If the questions have been answered in a recent BumbleKast, we're not going to answer them. We list all the questions with every episode. You can go back, do a quick search through. We're taking the time to answer the questions. You can take the time to do a little bit of research. Tiny bit. Smidgen. I believe in you. You can do it. Number 3, if you're asking about what would have happened in the Archie Sonic comics before the cancellation, before the reboot, any of that stuff, I can't cover it just now. I'm going to be covering it in a feature called Lost Hedgehog Tales, which is on indefinite hiatus while I deal with stuff that I also cannot talk about. So those questions are going to be ignored because I'm tired of saying I can't answer that just now. All your questions are put into a queue. We'll get to them when we can, but if you really want your question answered sooner rather than later, become a patron over at patreon.com/BumbleKast or submit $5 via Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/BumbleKast. Just make sure to include your name and your question in the donation so we know what you're doing with your money.
And I will say that if I have overlooked your question, just go ahead and ask it again. If it's been like a while and you haven't heard anything, like, just ask it again. That's fine. I'm not too picky about that. Also, if you want to know what's going to happen in the Archie comics, don't ask Ian because I don't think he knows. Not the Archie Sonic comics, just the Archie comics. Anyway,
oh yeah, I got no idea.
Anyway. First up,
let's do the priority Q&A.
Yeah, first up, priority Q&A from Koopaling Krew. Is there any video game genre you'd wish to someday see the Sonic series attempt to tackle, regardless of whether Sega or a third party makes it? For example, I think playing as Sonic and friends in a Dynasty Warriors style game mowing down Badniks would be awesome for the flair of the moves and how well Sonic's speed would be built for getting around the battlefield so quick. Or would you rather like to see Sega try to tackle a non-platforming genre again with Sonic? They've got an RPG, free roaming racer, fighting game, metroidvania, and, of course, Puyo Puyo. Puyo is truly its own genre.
Indeed. I think Sonic is versatile enough that he could work in a variety of game styles, and I may or may not have put together game docs for a bunch of these ideas that will never see the light of day, but I would love to see a Sonic RPG in the Tales of style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that fits Sonic better than turn-based. I specify the kind of Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Vesperia era.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like more recent titles are a bit spammy, button mashy. You can't really tell what you're doing. Where I feel like the Abyss and Vesperia period had just enough technical, but also enough flair that it would fit with Sonic and the Crew.
Right.
I could see it working in a Fire Emblem style tactical game, believe it or not. You know, treat speed, flying, and power types as unit classes.
Oh, yeah. And of course, people
I'm not quite sure how to go from there, but I think at its core, it could work.
And of course, people would love the relationship aspects.
No, let's not even go there. I would love to see a return to the Sonic R style of racing. The Sumo Digital racing games are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but these characters are known for running really fast on foot. And Sonic Rivals kind of whetted my appetite because it basically was a racing game.
Yeah.
When you get down to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see Sonic R2. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to see a Sonic R that actually controls well. That would be nice. Please.
And I'd like to see a fighting game, but I can't settle on whether it be like a Smash Brothers thing, because you could make a Smash Brothers title out of the regular Sonic roster just by itself.
Oh, yeah, we had Sonic Battle. That's essentially Smash.
Sonic Battle.
It's kind of like, it's not great, but it's like a Smash-inspired sort of battlefield.
It gets points for trying to do something different.
It's got like a Battlefield fighting game feel to it, rather than like
of course,
I don't mean Battlefield, the shooter series. I just mean like just an open area with multiple fighters all in one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of course, I'd also like to see a Dragon Ball Fighter Z style, or Fighters, style. Just absolute gorgeous, over the top, frantic action. Just maybe not quite as technical, because I picked up the game maybe a couple days after it came out and was completely left in the dust. I'm no good at your standard 2D fighting games. So, but I would watch it, I guess, so I could still consume it in some form.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's Arc System Works. It's not out of their realm of possibility for them to work with Sega. Or actually, wait, are they owned by? Is Sega own them? Or no? Wait,
I don't know.
Maybe they do. I don't know. I can't tell. I don't think they technically own them, but like they have connections with Atlas and stuff. So yeah.
And for pity's sake, give me my mobile gacha chow raising game already.
Oh no!
It's money sitting on the table,
dude. It just feels dirty.
I don't care. I like the collection aspect. I like to be able to, here's my chow. I take care of it for a couple hours, put my phone down, do something else, come back, feed it a chow nut. It doesn't need to be more in depth. I mean, I have ideas for other stuff, but just do something with the chow. Give me my chow.
The gambling aspect of the games like that just makes me feel icky, Ian. It just does. Yeah.
Leave that to the people who have problems. I want my mobile game.
Okay, fine, whatever. I want a Dynasty Warriors Sonic game. That's all I want. I want everything a Warriors game. That's all I want. That's like all I want video games to be is Dynasty Warriors, especially after playing Hyrule Warriors. I'm like, yeah, I just want everything to be this. That's all I want. like just make everything this style of game. I'm into it. Make it happen. Make it happen. Next question comes from the Imagine Breaker 121212. Hello, Ian and Kyle. I think I and some fans need clarity since there seems to be dispute and confusion in which we misunderstand the Archie Sega IDW multiverses and their relation to other multiverses. Parallel universes, we got it. Archie and Sonic are different multiverses and related through parallel universes but separate, which you've added as apples and oranges. So I've been thinking, would Rockman, Riverdale, Image, since all three have crossed over with the Archie Sonic multiverse at some point, DC, Marvel, and all others be from different multiverses as well, like Ultimate Ensembles? Basically, the system is Sega are limited but wide. Archie is expansive and elegant, very similar, but slightly off, and others from different multiverses have differing laws that exist, while some are similar or radically different. Is this the closest to the apples and oranges analogy as an understanding? I like to think of it as like the Marvel omniverse in its size and qualities, to not scramble and confuse my brain in a bunch with the different multiverses with entirely different dimensions, like Mark Gruenwald and is Boom Games, IDW and Archie, the Sonicverse, in different parallel universes set in different branches of different cardinals of separate multiverses. Like, can you dissect this, Ian?
Yeah. Basically, you're saying, how do all the different interpretations of the different multiverses of the different versions of Sonic fit together? And I really like putting things together, but I think there reaches a point where you just kind of have to back off and say, no, you try too hard. I mean, there is a certain amount of fun to be had saying, okay, this crossed over with this, therefore this can be related to that, and it all fits into some gigantic galactic Mandela in which all things are one. But let's just keep it simple.
Eventually
IDW
it gets unwieldy.
Yeah. IDW Sonic is its own thing. You just think of it as that. It has a multiverse in that there are different dimensions, the human world, Blaze's world, whatever comes up down the road. But it's its own thing. Mm-hmm. And just think of it like that. Think of it as its own little bubble. And then Archie Sonic played with its own version of the multiverse, but all of that is contained within it and is now dead and buried. Now, the Sega official canon is its own thing that certainly influences the other media that comes from it, but I would still compartmentalize it as its own thing.
Yeah.
If there's a crossover here and there, that's fun, but I wouldn't try to make any kind of serious connection between them all and find some kind of complete network. If you want to do that on your own time because it's fun, go for it. Have a blast. I won't, say boo about it. But if you're looking for me to like confirm this is that and this encapsulates this and this is connected to that and it all comes together like this, I can't provide you with that roadmap. The Archie Sonic series is done, and I've put it aside because it's not coming back. My focus now is on the IDW Sonic and making it its own thing, and we move on.
Right. And the games are their own thing because I think very little, if any, sort of outside other Sonic media influences the games a whole heck of a lot. The games will influence everything else around it, but the games themselves are pretty much kind of self-contained. They don't really pick up stuff from the other versions of Sonic out there. So
like
it's another thing that's
gotten is like the chili dogs.
Yeah, it's another thing that's kind of in its own bubble. So yeah.
Basically, the games are the foundation of the franchise.
Right.
They set the standard from which all other media is derived.
Yep. All right, our next question comes from Diane W. In Sonic X, Eggman learned that despite being an inhabitant of Sonic's world, he was actually born on Earth, not to mention not having any memories of Earth, but we never learned how Eggman ended up in Sonic's world to begin with. Do you have any idea of how Eggman ended up in Sonic's world?
I could speculate here and there, but without having a concrete idea quite of how Sega is looking at the two world scenario, I haven't really invested a lot of time thinking about it. In part because I know I wouldn't be able to have the latitude to create an origin story for the principal characters. So it's not something I've devoted a lot of thought to. There's certainly a lot of easy explanations, I would think, but I don't know. Hopefully, maybe someday Sega will throw us a bone and say, hey, this is how it be. Be like, all right, there you go. And I hope it's good, because that's, like we said, the games are the foundation, so whatever they establish is what we got to work with.
And our last priority Q&A question comes from Andrew D. I remember a long time ago on the BumbleKing forums that there was a question about the Starlight Zone that appeared on the map in Volume 1 of Archie Sonic. Someone asked something about it, and I remember you mentioning that you had plans for it. Fast forward to today, and we still don't know. Yes, I know all your plans will be written in Lost Hedgehog Tales, but I was hoping you might be able to shed some light on this area of the map.
Okay, this one gets some wiggle room. One, because it's priority Q&A, and two, because the answer is I have no idea. There's nothing to wait on. There's no notes to be revealed. I have no idea what I had in mind at the time. Now, normally this kind of question would go straight to the trash bin because it violates all the rules, but we make the exception because there is no answer.
There we go. Yeah, it's Starlight Zone. Just chill out, enjoy the music, relax after the freaking harrowing experience that was Labyrinth Zone. I mean, come on. Jeez, don't go back to Labyrinth Zone. Just hang out in Starlight and have fun.
Doesn't it have just the grooviest track though?
Speed around.
Oh.
Yes, I spent hours in the sound test probably listening to Starlight Zone.
Probably the best track in that game.
Yeah, it makes me real sad that everything is like, oh, Green Hill this, Green Hill that. Like, I'm sorry, you got Starlight Zone right here. What are you doing? I mean, you even have Spring Yard Zone, which is also better than Green Hill. But whatever. I know what people are like. They want their Green Hill, I guess. I don't know. Whatever.
That and Starlight was, an industrial themed stage, which we've seen tons of, but it wasn't in the same vein as most of the industrial stages we see in later Sonic games.
No.
Nice green palette, nice soothing backdrop, very chill music.
It's just a nice city that's under construction in parts of it. And has some explosives in there because why not? All right, let's go ahead and get into the standard Q&A. This one comes from Sebastian G. Ever since Ian shared his pitch to Archie for a Mario comic a few weeks back, this is probably a few months back by now, it got me wondering, how does the process of pitching a licensed comic typically work? I recently took a class on pitching an animated series, and I'm curious to hear about the comic side of things.
From my experience, and this is by no means the way to do it, is the publisher approaches me saying, we are pursuing acquisition of the license for this property. Can you put together a pitch for it? And sometimes they'll have a specific format in mind. We're going to do a mini series. It's going to be set in relationship to the canon, or it's going to be this length. Go with whatever you want. Or we're open to ideas, pitch us a few things, how would you approach it? And you tailor the pitch from there. Mostly it's a quick overview of what the objective of the series is. Is this going to be a mini-series? Is this going to be an ongoing series? And how does it present the material that's being licensed? And then a brief breakdown of how we would approach it. Like if it was a mini-series, issue 1, 2, 3, 4, or however many, this is how we would approach the storyline. Or if it is a longer running thing, how would we approach the themes? What's an example of a quick storyline to open us up? And then we would go from there. There's no exact format. It's more of presenting the idea of how you're going to approach the series and how you're going to adapt the licensed property to fit the comic format, while also making it sound really cool and that, why didn't this get started sooner? That we have a fantastic idea here. Can't wait to get it off the ground.
Alrighty. Next question comes from Madeline Sega Stars 7. For IDW, do you have any special ideas for future stories for Sonic and Tails that show their brother bond?
Nothing specific, but it's kind of part of who they are. So all their interactions are based on that.
All right. Next question comes from Big Bill's Hell's Cars, which is a great name, but I'm not 100% sure why. I don't know. It sounds like a car dealership, but a weird one. I don't know.
Come on down to Big Bill's Hell Cars. It's a hell of a ride.
Yeah, something like that. That's all I can think of. Hey, I've been wondering about the status of the ARMS comic that Ian was writing. The most recent news we've gotten is that it was pushed from a late 2018 release to January 2019, but now we're currently in November. Actually, now we're in almost February of 2020. And we still haven't gotten word on it. We haven't gotten word on it since. So, yeah, that's a heck of a delay.
Yeah, and I've heard rumblings of why things got pushed back, but nothing too dire, no doom and gloom, just things happen.
Mm-hmm.
I would keep an eye on Dark Horse's media channels, their Twitter handle, their news site, and whatnot. That's where news will be. As far as my contribution is concerned, I'm done with the project, unless there's going to be revisions at this point, which, surprise, but it's written to completion. So where it goes from here, I don't know. That's a question for Dark Horse.
I'm speculating here. And I'm not expecting you to even be able to comment on this or answer it. But my thought is that maybe they were expecting the game to do better than it did, and because it didn't, they've kind of not shelved it officially, but they've kind of just pushed it back.
No, nothing like that.
Nothing like that? Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Or as far as I have heard, nothing like that.
Okay.
Like the reasons I've heard are completely innocuous, and you kind of go, really? That's it? But again, I haven't been in the loop for a while.
Okay.
But any news is going to come through Dark Horse.
Yeah. You're probably going to see the news at the same time me and Ian do. I mean, especially me. I don't hear about anything. And our last question comes from Demi. Or Demi. Not 100% sure. Seeing as Claire was using a hover wispin and Mimic was using a cube wispin, were the weapon Smithy and Slinger using a spikes wispin and laser wispin, respectively? And Whisper's rocket wispin, maybe?
Yes, that is exactly what was shown in the comic.
How dare you show things in a comic, Ian? What is this? A medium with a visual medium? Also with words? What are you, crazy?
Now, granted, Claire was using the actual hover wispon from the game.
Uh-huh.
And now I can't remember if Mimic was using the actual hammer wispon or not. I think so. Smithy and
Slinger,
thank you. And Whisper are all using comic exclusive wispons, so if there was some confusion from that, I can kind of understand.
Oh, okay.
But they're also color coded to their projectiles, so that was meant to be a visual cue.
Well, sometimes people can't see color, Ian.
This is true. So if I just insulted the colorblind, I do apologize.
I mean, I wasn't making a joke there, but I guess I kind of was. I don't know.
So we're just going to move on and say thank you to all the wonderful patrons who understand that sometimes I'm dumb and support this show. Big thank you to Daniel H., Eric F., Connell T., Alex P., Zastando27, Diane W., Justin S., Andrew D., Blue Title Gamer, Koopaling Krew 128, Chris A., John B., Jennifer R., Revan the Light, Lisa M., Pat Padripadopoulos, Fernando A., Frederick, Scruffy Matt, PC the Unicorn, Duaz Diz Din, Dave, Mike B., Samuel P., Sam Cybercat, Digama F. Wow, Brody M., Final Neil, Justin G., Dan M.S., Silly String, Takaro, Lee H.K., Chevelle, Don B., Sin Fritz, John M., James K., Adam B.T., and Overthinking Films. After the show, you can find my website, bumbleking.com. That's got a release schedule calendar, the FAQs, and my full portfolio, along with other cool stuff. Also, check out the free webcomic I'm doing with Adam Bryce Thomas, Drogoon, DROGUNE.com. Free pages every Friday, and you get gift art if you're a patron over at patreon.com/Drogoon. You can also find me on Twitter at IanFlynnBKC. Kyle, where can the fine people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me reading Drogoon because it's some good stuff. You should go check it out. But anyway, you can also find me on Twitter at KyleJCRB, and you can head on over to kngi.org, where you can find archived episodes of the BumbleKast in MP3 downloadable format for your listening pleasure with any device you own. You can also find all the podcast feeds and links and RSS stuff over there, so you can add it to your podcast app of choice. You can also listen to my other show, Nitro Game Injection, which streams live on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can also catch the archives of it over there as well. at kngi.org. All the stuff is over there. There's also the 24/7 live stream of video game music remixes and all sorts of other cool stuff that plays all the time. So if you're in the mood for something to listen to, and I don't know, you don't have Spotify or you don't like Google Play Music or whatever and want to listen to something else instead, head on over there and check it out.
You can follow the show on Twitter at BumbleKast. You can contact us at BumbleKast@yahoo.com. And you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, and everything Kyle just mentioned already.
And don't forget to also head on over to the Bumble store and get yourself decked out with some Bumble swag at shop.spreadshirt.com/Bumble store. You can get our logo, you can get our faces, you can get whatever you want on whatever you want. Like, you can get a shirt, you can get a mug, you can get I don't know, what else do they sell, Ian? Stuff?
Phone cases, pillows, tote bags, children's clothing, if you really want to scar them for life.
Well, if they are aware of the show at all, then they've already been scarred. It's fine.
Make them a qualified Bumble kid.
Sure. Why not?
You can also catch us gaming with BumbleKast Gaming Live every Sundays on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/BumbleKast Gaming. Usually on Sundays around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check out Twitter at BumbleKast for any kind of announcements, changes, or stuff like that there.
And don't forget to also follow us and, maybe hit that subscribe button over on Twitch. I don't know. Maybe think about that. I don't know. Just give it a try, Maybe you might enjoy it. Maybe you'll have some fun. Who knows? Maybe I'll play some more Doom. We'll see. I'm still making my way through Doom. I'm kind of slow, and I'm now doing some off-stream building up. I'm going back and getting the stuff I missed in older levels, so I can be super overpowered for the final boss, I guess. So
excellent.
Yes, that's going to be exciting. So be sure to tune in for that.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the BumbleKast. We'll see you in a couple weeks for, heaven help us, our review of Sonic the Hedgehog the movie.
Oh no! The one from 1995? We're finally doing it, Ian? We're finally doing it? We're finally talking about that?
No, Kyle. The new one.
Oh boy, here we go. Why is there a baby Sonic?
I've been in this franchise too long, man.
You've become jaded. I don't blame you, so have I.
I've stared into the abyss and then stared back and said, "Damn, son."
Big Bell's Hell's Cars is a video. Home of the thumbnail. Home of challenge pissing. What?
Okay, here we go.
Anyway. Oh boy, Adventures of Sonic was a mistake. You know what? I'm gonna leave Dave in there because it still works. I'm going to destroy you, Ian.
Do that.
Maybe not like that, but I'm going to tarnish your reputation. Actually, I
silver polish in the world.
Actually, I already have tarnished your reputation because you're doing a show with me. Guilt by association. Anyway, go ahead.
Pick up in 3, 2, 1.
There's no pickup there.
No, that's the after credit stuff.
You're an after credit stuff. Balance might be slightly off between me and Ian during the recording here, so sorry about that. We'll see.
That's implying I was bounced to begin with. Waka waka.
Anyway. You've been listening to the BumbleKast, a co-production of Bumble King Comics and the KNGI Network. Original theme music composed by Ken Coda Snyder. Remixed intro by T-Lopes. Find out more information, along with podcast feeder links, MP3 downloads, and more at bumbleking.com and kngi.org. Oh man, that reminds me, we should do an episode on the Super Mario Brothers movie. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
You
I saw
have?
it in theaters when it came out. I was excited.
Okay, so did I. I am very apologetic. I'm very apologetic with that movie. I adore that movie.
I give it no leeway. It was bad. It was wrong. You had this opportunity to delve into a fanciful world, and you did it completely wrong. No. Shame on you. Shame on you, Mario Brothers movie.
I mean, in terms of an adaptation of Super Mario Brothers, it's awful. But in terms of just being a fun, enjoyable movie, I think it succeeds, and I think it's a lot of fun. And I like.
But it's not just a movie; it's the Mario Brothers movie.
But I like the world it establishes.
Out to be the Mario Brothers movie. It failed at that spectacularly on every conceivable level.
I like the alternative universe idea of this version of Mario, though. I don't mind sort of this.
If
sort
we
of
already had an
cyberpunk
established Mario movie, that would be fine. We don't. All we have is that, and it's wrong, and it's bad, and grr.
I just like the cyberpunk. I like that sort of...
That's
that
fine.
Aesthetic and everything about... I just like it. I like it. The cast is great. Like, it's...
You are free to enjoy it. I'm going to be the curmudgeon who sits here going, no, it's wrong. Therefore, it is invalid. It is completely without any artistic merit, and I will die on this hill.
It has plenty of artistic merit. That game that movie is. It's surprisingly there's a lot of Mario references and stuff hidden in the background. Like if you look at it, there's like little.
It shouldn't be in the background. Cool it should be in a movie.
I know. There's just like these little cool things everywhere. I know what it is. It's silly. It's dumb, but I don't know. I still like it. I don't know, man.
I'm glad you found enjoyment in it. I refuse.
Maybe we should do an episode on this. That'd be fun.
Folks are already mad at me because they're going to be incensed after that.
It's fine. In terms of like cheesy 90s licensed movies, there are worse. There are worse offenders than the Super Mario Brothers movie. I'll tell you what. There's some bad ones out there. It's rough. This is some rough stuff. So, anyway, let's get out of here.